The spark. The Zoltherian throne world was built to remind lesser species of their place. Spires of black crystal stabbed the skies, each taller than Earth's tallest skyscraper, and the Great Hall was vast enough to dock a starship inside. Rows of alien dignitaries filled the tiers. Most bowed low, some trembling, none daring to lift their eyes to the dais. Elias Kane did. He stood among the human delegation, little more than a translator, his job to echo the words of the ambassador into the guttural dialects of the Empire. He had never meant to be noticed. Humanity was new to the stars, barely a century past its first interstellar jump, and its leaders had come here to secure trade, not to make enemies. But the Zaltherians had a way of turning diplomacy into humiliation. The Empress's speaker, a towering figure with ivory plating across his shoulders, sneered at the delegation. "Primitives," he said, voice amplified across the chamber. "Your kind scuttles from the mud of one insignificant world, and yet you dare to seek terms of equality with the Eternal Empire." The human ambassador bowed stiffly, as protocol demanded. Elias felt his jaw tighten but said nothing, until the speaker's eyes settled directly on him. "You, translator, kneel before the throne. Let all witness how your kind remembers its station." The air in the chamber thickened with silence. Other ambassadors looked away. Some smirked. This was nothing new. Zaltherians enjoyed their little rituals of submission. Humans were expected to obey, if only to avoid offending the power that could snuff out Earth in a day. The ambassador hissed under his breath, "Elias, do as they say." But Elias Kane did not kneel. He was not tall, nor imposing. His suit was plain, his posture rigid, his palms damp with sweat. But his voice carried, steadier than he felt. "I represent no throne," he said, his words picked up by the hall's recorders. "I bow to no tyrant. Not he. Not ever." The silence broke like glass. A ripple of disbelief surged through the crowd. The speaker froze, eyes wide with rage, before slamming a clawed fist against the dais. "Arrogant wretch," he roared. "You will kneel, or you will burn. Your world will burn." Guards seized the humans, dragging the ambassador away, but Elias was held fast, forced to the floor. Still, he did not bend his knee. Cameras captured everything, the translator refusing, the Empire threatening extermination over a single man's defiance. By the time Elias was released back to Earth custody, the moment had already spread across networks. Billions had seen it. One fragile human, standing tall against the oldest empire in the galaxy. And on the throne world, the speaker's wounded pride hardened into fury. Within hours, orders were dispatched to mobilize fleets. The Zoltherian Empire would make an example of this upstart species. For Elias Kane, it was just a refusal. For the galaxy, it was the spark. The war had begun. Resistance ignited. The Zoltherian fleet arrived in Sol with the arrogance of conquerors. 20 warships, each the size of a city, dropped out of slipspace in a formation meant to impress as much as intimidate. Their commanders expected surrender within hours. After all, what could a single backwater world offer against the Eternal Empire? The first strikes were precise, almost casual. Power stations shattered, orbital satellites burned. Earth's military scrambled in disarray, their weapons laughably outdated compared to the Empire's plasma lances and shielded dreadnoughts. Governments prepared statements of capitulation. The lesson was supposed to be swift. Defy the Zaltherians, and watch your world kneel. But humanity did not kneel. It began with sabotage. On Luna, a group of engineers hacked into an abandoned mining array, turning drills into railguns that punched holes in a destroyer's hull before the Zaltherians realized they were under fire. In orbit, pilots and outdated fighters swarmed like gnats, too small and too many for the Empire's heavy cannons to track. Each battle ended in human losses, yet each cost the invaders more than they expected. On Earth itself, resistance blossomed like wildfire. Cities dug in, soldiers and civilians fighting side by side. The Zaltherians expected terror, but found defiance. Elias Kane's face, captured on feeds refusing to kneel, became a symbol, printed on banners and broadcast through pirate channels. His words, "I bow to no tyrant," echoed through trenches and bunkers. The Zoltherian commanders dismissed it as primitive stubbornness. They told themselves humanity was no different from the dozens of species they had subjugated. But cracks already showed in their strategy. They had brought too few ships, assuming overwhelming force would be unnecessary. Every loss was magnified. Every delay carried across the Empire's networks. Kane himself had been evacuated from the capital, but he refused sanctuary. Instead, he traveled between resistance cells, speaking not as a commander but as one of them. He reminded them that they fought not just for Earth, but for the dignity of every species the Empire had crushed. "Let them call us primitives," he told a crowd in the ruins of New York. "If we must be beasts to be free, then beasts we shall be, and we will teach them to fear us." The word spread like sparks to dry tinder. In the Empire's vassal worlds, whispers grew. If a young species like humanity could resist, what excuse had they for silence? The Zaltherians tightened their grip, broadcasting executions and bombardments as warnings. But the footage only made Kane's defiance shine brighter. By the end of the first year, Seoul still stood, ruined, bleeding, but unbroken. The Empire had expected a swift conquest. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a grinding war of attrition. And still, the humans fought, adapting, innovating, refusing to surrender. The Speaker of the Throne raged that all of this had begun with one insolent translator. Yet every blow meant to erase Elias Kane's words only carved them deeper into the galaxy's memory. Humanity had lit the fire, and the flames were spreading. The turning tide. By the third year of war, Earth should have been ash. At least, that was what the Zoltherian War Council had promised their empress. Yet Sol remained defiant, scarred but alive, a thorn that refused to be plucked. The reason was not strength of arms but the persistence of human ingenuity. When plasma cannons leveled cities, humans dug tunnels and fought underground. When orbital blockades cut supply lines, they launched swarms of jury-rigged drones built from civilian tech. Every time the Empire adapted, humanity twisted around the blow, turning desperation into strategy. And at the center of it all stood Elias Kane. He had no rank, no uniform, and yet soldiers and civilians alike treated him as a commander. His speeches, once meant only to steady frightened resistance fighters, were now smuggled across the stars. In secret networks, Kane's words were replayed in alien tongues. The Empire is not eternal. It bleeds, and if it bleeds, it can die. The Zaltherians mocked him as the kneeling ghost, the man who should have bent but hadn't. Yet every attempt to assassinate him only added to his legend. Twice his transport was destroyed, and twice he crawled from the wreckage, blooded but alive. To the oppressed, he seemed untouchable. The true turning point came at Callisto. A Zoltherian fleet of 10 warships had been sent to crush the last human holdout in the Jovan system. Instead, they found themselves walking into a trap. Kane had worked with Earth's surviving admirals and rogue alien sympathizers to prepare the battlefield. Old asteroid mining rigs were fitted with nuclear drives and guided by hacked navigation software. As the Zoltherian fleet entered orbit, the rigs ignited, slamming into enemy ships with catastrophic force. Shields designed to repel plasma fire failed against sheer kinetic impact. In 1 hour, half the fleet was reduced to wreckage. The victory was not decisive by military standards. Earth still bled, but the psychological blow echoed across the galaxy. If a species barely a century into spaceflight could destroy the pride of the Empire, then perhaps the Zaltherians were not gods. Perhaps they could be beaten. Rebellions flared like stars igniting. On Korath, slaves seized shipyards and turned warships against their masters. On Veltra, miners detonated their own tunnels to bury Zoltherian garrisons alive. Everywhere, the rallying cry was the same: we will not kneel. The Empire suddenly faced not one enemy, but dozens. Their fleets stretched thin, their logistics strained, their myth of invincibility shattered. For the first time in centuries, Zoltherian commanders argued not about how to expand, but how to survive. Kane watched the reports come in from a hidden command bunker beneath the Andes. He felt no triumph, only grim resolve. This war was larger than Earth now. Humanity had lit the fire, but the galaxy was feeding it. "The tide is turning," one officer told him. Kane only nodded. "Then we make sure it never ebbs." The Empire falls. The Zoltherian capital burned. For millennia, its towers of black crystal had stood as monuments to conquest, symbols of a rule that claimed to be eternal. Now those same spires cracked and shattered under the bombardment of rebel fleets. The Empire's once proud banners lay trampled in the streets, and its soldiers fought not for glory, but for survival. At the heart of the chaos, Elias Kane walked through the grand hall where it had all begun. He remembered standing here years ago, a translator no one respected, ordered to kneel before the throne. Now, the chamber was in ruins, marble floors cracked, smoke curling from shattered ceilings. The day is scorched by plasma fire. The Empress's speaker, the same creature who had once mocked him, lay in chains at his feet, stripped of his ceremonial armor. Outside, the galaxy roared with rebellion. Human fleets, patched together from captured ships and salvaged wreckage, fought beside liberated aliens. Each world that had once cowered under the Empire's fist now struck back with vengeance. What had begun as humanity's desperate defense had become a war of liberation. Kane was no general, but the coalition treated him as their face. He was not the strongest fighter nor the sharpest strategist, but he was the symbol they needed, the man who had refused to kneel when all others bowed. Across 1,000 battlefields, soldiers wore his likeness painted on their armor. His words, spoken in a dozen languages, carried through the void. Empires fall. Freedom endures. The Zoltherian High Council was dragged before him, a broken circle of beings who had once ruled unchallenged. Their arrogance had withered into fey. One of them hissed, "You have no right to judge us. You are nothing, an insect who defied the sun." Kane looked at them, weary but unyielding. "And yet here we stand, in the ashes of your empire." Perhaps the sun was never as eternal as it claimed. There was no single decisive battle that ended the war, no neat surrender. The empire collapsed under the weight of 1,000 cuts, uprisings it could not quell, fleets it could not replace, faith it could not restore. Humanity had merely been the match. The galaxy itself provided the fire. When the last Zoltherian banners fell, Kane stood not as conqueror, but as witness. The coalition debated what would come next. A council of free worlds, a fragile alliance born from shared suffering. Earth was scarred, its cities ruined, its people hardened. Yet in their scars lay pride. Against all odds, they had endured. Years later, historians would argue about strategies and technologies, about the moment the war truly turned. But in every account, one memory remained unshaken: the translator who had refused to kneel. For in the end, it was not fleets nor armies that destroyed the empire. It was one human, standing tall,